All right, we are live. Thank you so much for tuning in to my webinar with Heather from Calluna Events. So I'm so grateful that she's here today. And we are going to be talking about lots of different things pertaining to booking clients, getting your calendar full. What is it that potential clients are looking for when they're hiring their team of vendors? So Heather is an amazing expert in this, as she has been in business for 16 years. So she has seen it all. She's worked with so many brides. Like, if you had to guess how many clients you've had, can you?
I mean, I think like over 500 or 600 at least. I mean, I haven't done the math in a while, but it's been a lot over the years. So we've been
500 or 600 different clients.
Yeah.
And then, so she's definitely seen it all. And I've just been so impressed to see how she's been growing over the years, how she manages her team. Like, she really has a well-oiled machine over there, and she gets amazing clients with, beautiful weddings. They're definitely some of my dream clients. So I am incredibly grateful to have her here. So let's start off. Tell us first about your company, Calluna Events, and who is your target client?
Yeah, so like you said, this is our 16th year in business. We are we're celebrating our 15th year this year. So I started the company in 2004. We're based in Boulder, Colorado, but we work all over the state and outside of the state. So we primarily work in the mountains of Colorado, all along the Front Range, regionally, and more recently, in the last several seasons, we've been doing more out-of-state work, which we love to kind of expand outside and challenge ourselves. But we have a team of 11 people, 2 interns, and then several lead planners and assistant planners. Some are part-time, some are full-time. But we started growing the team like pretty much a couple years in, and we've had some variety of full-time and part-time staff just to help. So some weekends we're doing no events, and some weekends we're doing 4 or 5 events. So just having a big team allows us to be able to take on more weddings at once. Our ideal client. We love working with like really authentic and real people. I know that is kind of cliche, but like, we're pretty down to earth. We love to just, when a couple walks in and says, we want our wedding to really reflect us and really be about kind of our guests celebrating us and our love, and like kind of being almost like a family reunion. We know that we're really going to jive with them, because they're focused more on the couple's experience, or their guest experience, than, really it being about, one particular aspect that they're trying to do. Like, and, great budgets are always helpful too, but when they're really talking about like how they want their guests to, be really celebrate their love, then, and I know it's not like specific, but I think our brides tend to be, like typical ranges, like 25, 35. We work with, heterosexual couples. We work with gay and lesbian couples. We just interfaith. Like we're very inclusive over here. Mm-hmm. We don't really have like a particular style in terms of color or non-color. But I think outdoors for sure. So like lots of lovely mountain views and outdoor tented events are kind of some of our favorites. So that's a little bit.
I think that all of your clients are just in for a treat when they hire you, because you are just so amazing to work with, but also you have built this amazing team that are equally as wonderful to work with. And I remember very distinctly, it was you and 2 girls on your team, and we were hanging out at a Yonder party here in Denver. And I just remember thinking, gosh, like, I love these people. Like, I want to surround myself with them. And I want to create a team like that myself, that like I feel like you guys bounce so many great ideas off of each other, and have this wonderful friendship in addition to a working relationship too. Yeah. So how many weddings do you plan and design each year?
So it varies a little bit from year to year, depending on how big our team is. I think last year we did about 57, like almost 60.
57.
Those aren't all weddings. We do some baby showers, we do birthday parties, we do rehearsal dinners. So that's kind of counted in that number. We also do corporate events. So our non-wedding events are a smaller section of what we do, but they fill out the year and kind of help challenge us and excite us like throughout the non-wedding season. But I think kind of the bulk of our weddings are more like, 40 to 50, and then we round out with some other events. But not all of them are full service. So we have a variety of ways that we work with our couples. So different levels of service. And so some are more of our, what we call our month of, and then some are like the full package. So when we say, 60, it's definitely some variety in there too.
That's a lot of events to manage and a lot of different personalities that you see and a lot of different situations that I'm sure arise. So let's jump right into the main topic. So I love it when I'm able to get feedback from planners on when couples hired me. So like even if they did hire me, I like to say like, okay, what was in their decision-making factors? Like what was important to them and why did I fit the mold? And then also too, when I have the opportunity to ask why I didn't get a job, to refine my experience, refine my website, refine my just my way of interacting with them in order to just make it better every single time. So what are the most important factors to your couples when they are considering who they're going to hire?
Yeah, so and I'll speak a little bit to if they have a planner or if they don't. And I think we talked about this before we jumped on. Obviously, if you have a planner that's working with the couple and maybe recommending the creative partner or vendor, that kind of gives you a little bit more leg up in that process. If you know the referral is coming from, maybe a past client or a planner, then you obviously have like one foot in the door. But if you are not working with a planner, I think it's, obviously being really responsive. I think millennials now, our clients who are millennials are expecting people to answer the phone or return an email really quickly. I know everybody's busy and they're sort of out and about, but we try to respond really quickly to any inquiries that are coming in. We used to respond with like pretty lengthy questions, and now we're finding that people just want to almost get on the phone or have some information pretty quickly and not have it be too many questions or too overwhelming. So we've kind of streamlined that process on our end. Even as much as like eliminating some of the pricing off of our media kit so that it's just more clean, and then having that conversation with them first before we're even like giving out any pricing. But I think like the responsiveness is pretty key. And if you can get an in-person meeting with them, which I'd say half of our meetings are in person and half are not, because we work with so many destination couples who don't live here. So if you can get face-to-face, I always say it's a lot harder for them to say no to you if you've met them in person or you've talked to them face-to-face. If that's just not possible, like a phone call obviously is, the way to go. And it's more personal than just trying to do something via email. But I think just when you get them on the phone, trying to listen, like we spend a lot of time asking questions and listening and trying to, hear what they're saying, what their needs are. And then we ask a lot of questions towards the end. And then it's sort of up to you to maybe not be so salesy on the initial outtake, but just more explain what you're providing. So if you're a photographer or you're a florist or, a planner, there's so many people out in the market nowadays. And I think that our couples, one thing that we've learned, and it's obvious too, is that they've never done this before. So they're coming, they don't know the questions to ask. They don't even know really what should be included in a package from a photographer. They don't know what's normal. Everything is so dynamic and changing. And one planning company might offer, this level of service, and another planning company might offer, a more limited, certain number of hours. And so I think when a couple is looking at choosing a vendor, the more information you can give them verbally, and they might get overwhelmed too when they're making the decision, and they may forget all about it once they hire you, so you might need to remind them. But I think just being really transparent to say, this is how many hours are included, this is what you will receive, and this is how I work, and then this is what you can expect from me, because that sort of builds that trust. And I think that's what we try to do, and really explain, how each step of the way is when they're working with us. And then I think that personal connection. So sometimes we find, for us, like the personal connection maybe is there more with another planner. And so maybe that's why we don't get the business, or maybe their budget isn't in alignment with where we're at. And if you're not asking where their budget is, then I think sometimes you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're just sending them a proposal and you haven't really said, hey, what's your budget for a photographer? If you've asked that question and you have like that range, then you can decide, hey, they're a little bit below what I charge, but I'm really connected with them, and it's a date that I'm looking to fill, so that I can like be a little bit more flexible. But if they're way outside of your budget range, then you can maybe have that conversation with them on the phone before you go down the path of writing a proposal, and then they get kind of overwhelmed when they receive a proposal and you're twice as much as they were looking to spend. So I think just lots of questions, and educating them on the process and what's included, and then building that trust with them, so that they kind of know, at least in the beginning, like what they're getting, what they're signing on to.
And I love that you say responsiveness, because I agree completely. I try to respond to the inquiries right away. So email is one of those things that can suck away all of your time from doing the things that you need to be doing. But inquiries is one of the places where I think it's incredibly valuable to respond right away. I actually had an inquiry yesterday, and I sent it out. It sounded like great. I loved the information they gave me. I emailed them right away. And then I saw today she inquired again. And I thought, okay, why is she inquiring again? Maybe my email didn't go through. Mm-hmm. So on my contact form, I have phone number. And I have that because I want to make sure I can call them if for some reason I'm not reaching them, or if I feel like they maybe didn't get my message. So yeah. I actually just sent her a text message and just said, hey, I saw you inquire again. Did my last email not go through? And she's like, no, I didn't get it. So I inquired twice with you. Oh, yeah. And I was like, oh, great. Well, like, I'd love to talk. Let's set up a call. Yeah. And literally 1 minute later, we were on a call. So I think it's really important to be quick, but then also number, because sometimes they might typo their email address in your contact form. Sometimes there's just issues with emails. You never know if it's going to go through or not. So I was able to get a consult right away just by sending a quick text. So I agree with you on all of that.
Yeah. And so I think to that point too, is that, if you've ever been in that process of trying to make a decision or hire, someone, if you are in the mindset of like, I'm ready to hire this person, then just by simply picking up the phone call, it might set you, leaps and bounds apart from other potential vendors they might call. They might have a list of people, but if you answer the phone and then you have a conversation with them, they might be the type of bride who wants to make that decision. And just we actually had that happen yesterday, where Jean on our team picked up the phone, answered an inquiry, had a great conversation with the bride, sent them a proposal, and she signed the contract last night. I mean, that's,
oh my gosh, one day.
That doesn't happen all the time. And then, some of our brides, it's like we talk to them, we send them a proposal, we send them 3 follow-ups, and then we still don't hear from them. So, I'm not saying that's going to happen every time, but if you can be like a little bit more responsive, it might even, and that's happened to us before too, where we've been traveling and we might not get back to them. And then it's literally the next day and we say, hey, so sorry, we were traveling or on site yesterday. And then we get in touch with them and they say, oh, sorry, we already hired somebody. So in that case, it's maybe not, it wasn't that they were looking to interview a couple people and comparison shop. They just were looking for someone they connected with right away, and kind of like the first person they talked to that they connected with was going to fit the mold. So anyway, I need to cut you off.
Yeah.
There.
So I think a lot of people they think about pricing as something that is very competitive as terms of like, how should I be priced? So I asked this question, Virginia, but I'd love your take on it. So do you find that couples have made decisions quite frequently because somebody's too expensive? Or have you ever found also that people have made decisions because somebody wasn't expensive enough and they dictate time that meant that they weren't experienced enough? So how important do you find pricing, and can it go either way? You're too expensive or you're too cheap?
Yeah, I think it really is so client dependent, and I think that you're not going to know that until you ask those questions about budget. And we try to ask a little bit of preliminary questions on our intake form about their budget and their guest count, and then we ask them on the phone call what their overall budget is and what their budget is for a planner. Because I think that the other thing that can help in that conversation is, like I said before, if it was a personal referral. So if it was like, oh, so-and-so, Laura Murray referred us, or this venue referred us, then, we know that it's maybe a pretty strong lead. Like, they've looked at our work, had a personal referral. And, if they're working with one of our, vendor friends, then we know maybe like the budget is on par. But if it's like they're cold calling, then we just need to ask a little bit more information about where their overall budget is. And if they don't know where their overall budget is, maybe they really don't know. But I think sometimes people have thought about the budget, but again, that goes back to the first thing I said, like, they've never done this before. So we find a lot of our couples, don't have a particular budget in mind. They'll say, like, we're looking to you to sort of educate us on what things cost. And so we're finding we're spending a lot more time in those first meetings talking about budget and where they, where they want to allocate their funds, like what their priorities are. Is their priority a photographer, or is it a 15-piece band, or is it the food and beverage and the venue, or is it all important? So we're trying to find out, like, what are the deal breakers that they can't compromise on budget-wise, and then look at their overall budget. And with us, we can sort of formulate based on the questions we're asking and what their needs are in terms of, do they want a full service planner? And we have different levels of full service that we work with our couples on. And so you can gauge really quickly when you're talking to them, if they're, looking at the $1,000 centerpiece, but they only have, $200, like, then I think there's a disconnect. And then asking those questions of, like, can we get there? Like, do you have some flexibility in your budget, or is this pretty set? So I think for us, it really, like, it goes either way for us. Like, I think we tend to book a pretty big range, not maybe like Virginia, where she's in Aspen. So I think a lot of her budgets are a little bit on, the higher end. We are on the front range. So we do have a variety of budgets. We're not the least expensive vendor by any means, but we do work with, budgets where, price shopping is a little bit in the mix. Like, they're not just saying, oh yeah, just hire us, whoever your favorite, photographer is. Like, they definitely are looking. And we have people who will say, like, they're more than we want to spend. And on the flip side, we have people that will say, great, they're perfect, and they're charging a lot more than what is typical for a wedding. I don't think we've ever had anybody say, like, oh, why aren't they charging more? Although I did have a bride recently say that about a musician, because they were charging like a lot less than she thought. She was like, maybe they're just not good. it like makes me think they're not valuing their time. So that was a more recent experience. But I think with the at least the photographers and florists we're working with, we ask a lot of questions before we're even referring, so we know we're in the ballpark of their budget before they're like having a conversation with the couple.
Okay, that's really great. And I just saw a question from Jamie. This is a really great question that adds on to what Heather's just saying. So you say you've got all variety of levels. Let's say you're somebody who wants to go to the next level. So let's say you're priced at a certain point, but you want to make a jump. So how would you suggest somebody gets there and is able to increase their pricing and justify it and start booking at a new rate?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you'll know if you are booking season after season and you're getting a lot of inquiries and you're getting a lot of bookings, like a high rate of bookings, and you realize at the end of the season that like, whoa, that was just way too many bookings, or I was working more than I wanted to, and not getting the quality to all the clients that I wanted. It's kind of that formula. And Rachel Hopple talked about this a little bit during the Level Up Planned workshop, where you have to find out, like, as a business owner, whether you're solo or you have a team, what do you need to bring in to break even, and what does your business need to make money? Like, what do you want to pay yourself? What do you need to pay your team? And then if you're hitting that threshold and you're doing the right number of weddings, or maybe you're doing a little bit more, then maybe the next year you can bump your prices up. And it's a little scary when you do that initially, because the idea is you're bumping your prices up so that you could in turn take less. And so you have to kind of figure out what that magic number is, like how many more weddings would you have to, or how many of the upper tier level weddings maybe would you have to do to make up for booking, maybe one or two less weddings over the course of the calendar year. So, I mean, I think there's no like right time, and I don't think there's any magic formula for how much you should bump up either. But I think if you're starting to feel like, wow, that was like, I had a great year last year, I did way more than I wanted to, it might be time to bump your prices up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. So I started out at a price point almost a decade ago, and bumps, but I was able to do that because I had a lot of inquiries coming in. So I track very closely the number of inquiries I get per month, and also where they're coming from and how many of them can afford me and how many of them can't afford me. So in the beginning, almost everybody that came to the door could afford me, because I needed the experience. I needed to put myself out there in a lot of different markets. Now, 80% of the inquiries that I get right off the bat, they say like, sorry, my budget, I love your work, but my budget doesn't allow me to hire you. And that's okay, because I don't want to book every wedding that comes my way, because you wouldn't have a life if you did that. So I feel like I really hit this sweet spot. In order to get to that sweet, there's things that you can do in terms of figuring out where your best inquiries are coming from. So for me, I know 80% of my weddings this year came from wedding planners, and 20% of my inquiries came from other photographers. And then I just booked one via Instagram, so that skews the results a bit, and I haven't recalculated. But that means that majority of them are coming from wedding planners. So it's really building strong relationships with the people who are working the weddings that I really want to do, and being somebody that they can trust, being somebody that they think of because I come front of mind, because I'm seeing them at events, I'm messaging them on social media, I've done great work for them in the past and really delivered for their clients. So for me, that's really great. But then also, I think, not discounting other photographers. Instead of thinking as other photographers as competition, I think it's really helpful to think of them as our colleagues. And I really get a lot of great inquiries with great budgets from other photographers when they're booked, and then I like to return the favor. And then I think it just comes down to continually making your work better and better, curating really well, making sure that what you put out there looks high end. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things to say in terms of
exactly all of that.
Some tips here, but yeah, I think we're always looking at like, what's next? How can we grow? How can we be better? And I think it's revisiting all of these things.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Let's see. So I had the question, it's actually kind of a similar question. So if somebody is having a slower year, what is your advice to getting more inquiries in the door and then converting your clients? We've talked about that a little bit. Is there anything different that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on this with like figuring out where your leads are coming from and then doing the work around that. So for us, like a lot of our referrals are venues and then previous brides, and then also photographers are kind of like that next tier down. So we do spend a lot of time, talking to venues, staying in touch with them, just updating them with our information, talking to our, vendor partners. So I think if you're a photographer or a vendor that maybe hasn't had like a lot of, bookings recently, you could, start reaching out to people and just letting them know like, hey, this is a slower year for me. I have these, windows open in my calendar, or, if you have a bride that's a good fit for me, I'd be willing to do, maybe a, like, I don't want to say discounted rate, but like a special for, we've had some photographers say like we're running like a Calluna special if you have any brides that are the right fit for us. So I think just reaching out. Also, we work with a business coach, and he talks a lot about having dynamic pricing. And so don't be, ashamed, or think that you're a failure if you're lowering your prices. So if you're like, and we do this even if we are heavily booked, if we have openings in our calendar, or we have, times during the year where it's like, oh, we could fill this in, or we know this particular month is lighter than others, or like right now we even have dates in our summer and fall bookings where we could, take on some more business. Like you could be very flexible with your pricing. So don't be like shooting yourself in the foot and be like super firm with your pricing if you're not booking as much. When we start to hit a threshold of booking, that's when we start to say like, oh, we're gonna, stick to our prices, and this is our minimum, and we're not taking anything less than that. And that's for us, it's always ebbing and flowing. So I'd say, reaching out, doing a lot more networking, like, pounding the pavement and meeting with people, and then just being clear on your pricing. I think you touched on this too, Laura, where you said curating your Instagram and your website. Like if you're having a slower year, it's a great time to look at your website. Maybe your wording needs a little refresh. Maybe your photos need a little refresh, so that maybe you're, kind of putting something new out there, or you're, like you say, curating to the client you're trying to attract. So we're always trying to update our website and our Instagram with, putting out there the type of client we're trying to attract to. So I think those are good times to do that when you're slower as well.
Mm-hmm. For one thing advice that you gave that I didn't even really think about is I don't do enough with venues. So to know that that's where so much of your inquiries come from is venues, that's something I should definitely be thinking about more, is connecting with venues, because they're the first person that that really gets the client. So thank you for that. That's going to go on my to do. Yeah. And then I also agree, refreshing your website. I remember I had another platform on my website, and it was so frustrating. Update. Like I hated doing it, and I literally would make my website, and then 3 years later, I would say, oh, maybe I should change it. So I just switched to Showit Sites, SHOWIT .co, and I love them. It's a breeze to update and change things around. So this is giving me freedom to make adjustments and tweaks, because I will be able to. I will be able to do it so much easier.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you approach which vendors you're going to recommend to a couple?
Again, it goes back to all those initial questions. We have once we talk to a potential couple, we ask a lot of questions in those initial, just about them and getting to know who they are, what their needs are, what their vision is for the day, and really like clearly, and this is maybe just because I've been doing this for so long, but I talk to our team about doing this too. I am almost like instantly writing down while the couple is talking which photographers I'm going to recommend, which florist I'm going to recommend, because I can just, it's a little bit about personality, it's a little bit about budget, it's a little bit about how they talk about those specific vendors or venues, like what the priorities are. You can learn a lot about them, and I'm talking more from a planner side. If paper is not important to them, I'm not going to recommend a high-end stationery company. But if it's like they're so gushing about the paper and the liner and the stamps and the custom calligraphy, then I know that that's an important piece to them. If they know the lingo about photography and they talk about, film photography or fine art or, editorial, or, a lot of our clients don't know any of those terms, but we talk to them about it and ask them in, the initial question, like what draws you to a certain vendor? Like what Instagram accounts have you saved? Like what style of photography are you drawn to? And so by asking all those questions and then knowing what their budget is, knowing their personality, then we can really recommend. And I think we're, not to kind of like pat ourselves on the back, but I think that's what we do really, really well, is really listen to our couples. And when we recommend their vendor team to them, they, I would say 9 times out of 10, they're like, you totally nailed it. Like, we love these recommended. Every once in a while they come back and they're like, these just aren't feeling quite right, like maybe aesthetically or budget wise. And so then we have to kind of go back to the drawing board, which are totally fine to do. We're not going to get it right every time. But I think we want to, sometimes we recommend one vendor, and then sometimes it's more of like a 3 to 5 type of thing. Like 3 is sort of the sweet spot, like where we'll say, here's our top 3 photographers, here's our top 3 florists. With my weddings, which are, kind of our higher end, more full service, like I almost recommend one that I feel like is the right fit, because a lot of times our full service clients are a little bit busier and they just want more of a curated experience. Like, here's who we are recommending. And, that doesn't always work either, where we might recommend one and then the pricing is a little bit off, or maybe the personality just isn't the right fit. And so then we do 2 or 3 eventually. But occasionally we'll get the client that's like, oh, we want to, meet with 8 florists, and we don't recommend that. But, sometimes we'll have couples that just, they need to do the research. They have the time on their hands. They want to, call everybody, and they feel like if they're making a decision after meeting with everybody, then it's an educated decision. And then other couples, they're just like, you've been doing this a long time, who's the best for us based on what we're telling you, and we trust you. And so that's a little bit about our process. And we have a very big preferred vendor list. We're always meeting with new potential partners. Like, we're always checking like who's new, what new bakers are out there, what new decor companies, what new photographers. We're constantly meeting with people in the off season to be able to really speak to like who's in the Colorado market, like who's the best fit here for our couples. And it's not the same. I mean, we obviously have worked with our tried and true and favorites years and years and years, but there's other people that we're constantly trying to bring on, and working with new people all the time keeps it fresh and exciting for us too.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So that means that even if you haven't worked with Calluna events, like, they've got their eyes out for new talent, new perfect fits for their clients, opportunity to get in there and be able to work 2 or 3 or 4 with Calluna events and build that relationship. So what is something that a photographer or a vendor would do that would prohibit you from getting hired? What's something that you'd say like, oh my gosh, this photographer did this and I can't believe it. No way do I want to hire them. When is a client going to say that?
So there's two sides to that. Like one is like the planner side and one is the client side. So what we see sometimes is if in the booking process, if the vendor or the planner hasn't asked very specifically what the budget is, or they make assumptions about what the budget is, or they just say, this is my pricing and that's that. And then you recommend that vendor and then the budget is like completely off from where they were thinking. Sometimes that has totally backfired because, for example, we had one, client that was like, this is how much I want to spend on floral. And when we did the meeting, we asked again, but the florist came in $5,000 above that. And when they presented the proposal, the bride was very turned off by that because it was so much more than what she had said. Some other client in that similar situation might have wanted to see like all the a la carte items and the options and the additional enhancements because they would have wanted to have that option to choose that down the road if budget allowed. And so the only way you're going to know that if they have like a really hard fixed budget is to ask them. And so we find that like on proposals where you can have like additional enhancements, and photographers do this with add-ons like with albums or prints or things like that. Those are all things that they can choose to get later. And that's the same thing for florists, where it's like, okay, here's a proposal we presented that's in your budget, but here's some, a guest book display or, an entry floral piece or escort card backdrop, or here's some, fun greenery in the ceiling that doesn't quite fit into the initial budget, but here's some fun things that we can present. So they're not looking at that bottom line number and saying, oh my gosh, they totally disrespected me. They didn't stick with the budget, but they did still present the options if the budget allows. They can, kind of get there. And I think in that same vein, the planner should listen to the client and, if they're saying they have X number amount of dollars and then you recommend a photographer that's just way out of the mix, you're kind of doing not only yourself and your client a disservice, but the vendor too, because then the vendor's wasting that time, trying to sell them on something when at the end of the day, it just might be more than they want to spend. So I think that's, kind of the pricing thing is goes back to just, asking point blank in the beginning, like what your budget is and just seeing if it's like there's hard, fast line in there. So.
Okay, so that's good. So if you come back much more expensive than they were thinking in the initial conversation, like that can definitely turn away some people. So maybe if you had add-ons, they're like separate, maybe they're a separate sheet or maybe a totally separate PDF so that it doesn't feel like, okay, here's your budget. And then, here's some things, but it's completely separate, like a disrespect. We just got another question. So from Emily, thanks for submitting. We have found this hurdle to overcome when moving across states and entering a new market area, knowing instant skill and what you offer and where it's stacked so you aren't priced too low or too high. Any advice to those of us that haven't been in the local market for over 5 years? So how do you find your pricing in a new area without undercutting or overcharging? So I love this. I have an idea, but Heather, what's your idea for the answer to this question?
Yeah, I think that, some vendors, if you can call people, sometimes vendors are an open book for what they're charging and how they're doing things. Sometimes they're not, but like we're definitely at that stage where we kind of know just from asking and where we're priced relative to our other planner friends. And, like you, if we're booked, we're referring people and we want to know where other people are priced so that if somebody's coming to us and they want a month of and we're too much, we can refer people who are less than us. So it's really helpful for us to know pricing, and we don't want to give away or people to give away everything. But I think that if you're new in the market, you definitely approach it with a vendor by saying, hey, I don't want to undercut you. I don't want to come in and start, undercutting, or, because then you become the vendor or known as the vendor that just undercuts or discounts, or, and maybe the clients don't know that, but the vendors know that, and you start to get sort of this bad name. And, we don't want to do that either. We never want to get business by undercutting someone else. We will be very clear with the couple by saying, what's your budget? And then if we can meet that budget, then it, works out. But we don't want to just, find out that someone's priced at a certain place and then come down just to get the price. Our pricing kind of in the busy season is what it is. But so yeah, I think if you can just, meet people for coffee if you're newer to the area and try to get to know their pricing and how they're doing things, then you'll be able to position yourself. I mean, I think if you're newer to the area too, you might be able to, charge less, at least to get your feet wet and, get some business here, but then not devalue yourself and what the work that you're doing either by knowing a little bit more about what your friends and competitors are charging. So.
Yes, I agree. I think the way to find out what people are charging in your market is very much to just ask. So if a photographer emailed me and said, hey, I'm new to Colorado, I love being here, I'm so excited, I admire your work, but I'm just curious, what are you priced at? I just don't know what the market is. I would be happy to send my PDF, because I think it just is helpful to be, and that way you have an idea. I think also connecting with the planners and saying, what do you see in this market? But then also, if you are going to price yourself a little bit lower to start, don't stay there for too long, because you can't, if you're not appropriately, you can go out of business. So you want to make sure that you are charging enough to stay in and to justify the value that you're providing to your clients. But also, yes, and I think the fact that you're already thinking about, I don't want to undercut people, is something that shows that you do care, and that you're not going to do that. Because I have certain markets that they say, oh, that photographer, she's always says she's is because she's always lowering her price to get the job, and I just can't compete with her because I'm not doing that in busy season. Like Heather said, she's got ability last minute, off season, but in busy season, that's the majority of my business. We just my pricing is what it is. So yeah, I think that's a great question.
Yeah. And I think we will lower our price sometimes, like I said, if it's an off season, or it's a Friday, or it's, maybe there's it's a venue we've been wanting to work at, or things like that. But usually our pricing is pretty firm until we're having that conversation with the couple. And
so what's a reason that a client of yours regretted hiring a vendor that they hired? And I love to learn from mistakes without making them sometimes. And so what's a mistake that somebody made and then they regretted their decision to hire that person?
Yeah, I think some of it comes in with not explaining what the value they're getting or what exactly they're getting. And then maybe our biggest frustration, and I think this is more on the venue end than with any particular vendor, but just all the associated fees where it's you want to bring in lighting or draping or a spider box, or you need a generator. And that's in part a lot of our job to educate the client on what they don't know. But I think the frustration is we had no idea that the caterer didn't bring an oven to cook. You know, we had no idea that we had to rent platters for them to serve food on. We thought they would just have that, or we had no idea that, you know, we would need lighting or a restroom trailer. So I think whether they're coming to you or they're coming to, you know, a planner, it's sort of our job to say, based on the type of wedding and the venue and what you're wanting, this is what you can expect. And it's pretty difficult in our industry because a lot of our couples come to us in particular and they don't have a venue. They're planning more than a year out. Like, you know, our average is like 15 to 18 months. We have a wedding that we're doing coming up that we've been working with them for 2 years. So a lot of things change, and you don't really know what that end goal is. You don't really know, like we just, our wedding that we have together in August, we just added an hour with the couple. And those are things that we try to explain to them in those initial conversations. Like, once we start developing the timeline, you may need to add an hour with your band. You may need to add, you know, dinner music because your band hasn't included that extra hour of dinner music, or an extra hour with your photographer or your cinematographer. So again, just those added fees. I think also the post-wedding for photographers and cinematographers is a frustration that we see sometimes, where some people aren't good about the post-production deliverables. Like, they'll say, you know, 6 to 8 weeks, and then it's, you know, actually 6 months later, and the bride is calling us saying, we haven't seen our photos. It's pretty rare that happens, especially now. Like, a lot of photographers are more quick to return, you know, get sneak peeks out and get albums out, but especially in peak season, like, you guys are busy. So just being really clear on what the expectation is, and then trying to deliver on that. Or if you're running behind, like, letting the couple know, like, hey, I'm, you know, a little bit out. Like, I know I said 6 weeks or 8 weeks, but it's actually going to be more like 10 or 12. And then if you explain that to them, then I think they're going to be okay on it. But then when it gets like further out, so those are like some frustrations there. I think, you know, vendors maybe not acting appropriately at the wedding or not coming dressed properly. It doesn't really happen a lot for our weddings, but I've heard stories where, you know, photographers will show up in, you know, just kind of like jeans and a t-shirt, and they just don't, you know, it's a black tie wedding or it's a dressy wedding. And, you know, obviously you're working, standing on your feet for 8 to 10 hours, but you want to be comfortable, but also look professional. So that's not going to be, you know, a deal breaker for one of our vendors. But I think that we feel like our vendor team is an extension of our team. So, you know, if we recommend someone, we want to feel good about their interactions and their professionalism on the day, and how they're executing on the day, and how they're speaking to the client and the guests. You know, whether or not the band is like requesting alcohol, we sort of leave that up to the client, but a lot of them do. And so we let the client know, like, hey, this isn't your contract that the band is requesting access to your bar. Like, are you okay with that? So just things like that, you know, it's up to us to make the client aware of that. But if the client doesn't know that the band is accessing the bar, and then they see them drinking and they're adding to the tab, then that can come back on us. Like, hey, why didn't you let us know that? And that was really inappropriate. You know, some couples don't care. They're like, oh, if they want to have some cocktails, if it's going to make them, you know, perform better, then, but just letting them know, again, because they don't know what they don't know. They've never done this before. So those are kind of the big ones. And I think too, for us, like a planner, working with a vendor that's, you know, collaborates with us and is a partner, like, we want to talk to the vendor ahead of time on what their needs are. Like, we're not developing the timeline in a vacuum. Like, we're pretty collaborative with our timeline, and we'll say, hey, this is what we think for ceremony and for getting ready, and they want to do a first look. What do you think timing should be? And then we kind of work together on the timeline. But we ask, and I know different vendors are different in the way they like to handle that. Some prefer the planner to set the timeline for them, and some prefer to do it themselves. And so we just ask, like, how do you want, do you want to set the hair and makeup timeline, or do you want us to do it for you and send it? And then we base, our timeline off of that, but then, interject our expertise to say, hey, I think we need a little bit more time here, or we need to add some transportation time in here. So we're not really the planning team that's like, here's your timeline, you need to make this happen. But on the flip side of that, if we're collaborating on a timeline and then we get to the day and then the vendor goes rogue, that is a sure way for us to say we probably won't work with them again, because, if photographer takes bride and groom off, but it's not in the timeline, and then all of a sudden we're supposed to be doing toasts, or, the dad or the mom is like, hey, where's the couple? And we can't find them because the photographer is running late, then that comes back on us. And so I think similarly, if the timeline runs late because, catering is late, or, speeches run late, like there's certain things that vendors control and there's certain things that guests control. So we're trying to, behind the scenes, make sure everything's running on time, and, you're not having to bill overtime for the client, and then the client's not having to pay overtime for the band or the photographer. And if that happens, again, that falls on the planner, because it's our job to make sure that it's running smoothly. So, just a vendor team collaboration. And if there's something that needs to happen on the day of, like, we feel like, hey, it's not too far beneath us to do any work. Like, we'll pick up, flower buckets and move them out of the way to get something set up, quickly before guests arrive, or we will, carry photography gear if we have to get the bride and groom out of the rain if it starts raining during the shot, or we've been sweeping rain out of the way after a rainstorm and drying chairs. So there's things that happen on the day of where you can't just say, like, this is my box and I'm going to stay in it. So just kind of reaching out and working as a team, because we're all, in it together for the success of the couple. And that's going to make us like want to work with a vendor again, that they're like, hey, we've got your back, and, we're going to do this together. So
yeah. Definitely a good advice for photographers in terms of delivery time. I think that setting that expectation, like you said in the beginning, is so crucial. My priority is always like, I want to deliver those photos as fast as possible. And this year I just started doing next day previews. And my friend Rebecca Gale, she told me it will change your business. So I said, okay, I'm going to do it this year. I shoot on film, but I have digital sneak peeks, and it's hard for me to want to put out the digital before my film, because like the film is my signature. But the sooner clients get photos in their hands, the happier they are. And I know of numerous stories of people wanting to move forward with lawsuits because they're taking too long on their photos. Well dressed and being professional. Something that I do that I recommend to anybody you can is some of your clients afterwards, ones that you feel like you've got a relationship with, I've actually sat down with them after the wedding and said, okay, let's what did I do well? What did I not do well? What did some of your vendors not do well and do well? So I can really get a sense of like what works and what doesn't with me and the whole team. And that just gives me it's power, because we can improve ourselves if we ask. And one of my past brides said that she's like, you were just fine. So woo, good there. However, she said there was another vendor that was working, and she said, I was really surprised by what she wore. So they are noticing what they're, and they may not it may not be a make or break, but it might make them cringe. And you don't want that.
Or just the comfort level too. Like you're mixing and mingling with, their family. And, when we show up from the rehearsal, like we're setting the tone, like we are setting the tone with the family, with the wedding party. Is like, we've got you, and we are the experts, and you can have confidence in us. And so that comes down to how articulate we are, how we present ourselves. And so I think it's all an extension. And just on your point about the survey, we do post-event surveys too. We don't ask specifically about any vendors, but they'll usually share like if there was an issue or they're upset about something. But we ask about Calluna, like how their experience was, what did we do well, what can we work on, and we take those to heart. Like if there are things that they say, like, hey, I mean, some of our things that we've implemented in the last couple of years, like we work with Aisle Planner. We also work with Honeybook, like our booking process. Our Aisle Planner is a planning software that's, not all of our couples use it, but all of our couples have access to it. And it just has streamlined and elevated their experience with working with us. And, some are super tech savvy and some aren't. And so just being able to elevate that experience for the ones that are more tech savvy was some feedback that we were just wanting to kind of keep up with the times, especially with people that are on their computers and wanting to like plan online. So I think it's really good to ask your clients after the fact. Like we always say, would you have hired us again? Do you feel like the you paid is fair? Did you interview anybody else? Like we don't ask them at all beforehand, but we'll ask them, hey, did you interview anybody else? And what attributes made you choose Calluna? And so those are, and we also, when we don't get a client, we ask them, we'll say, hey, best of luck. Thanks for letting us know. Do you mind letting us know who you decided to go with and what factors? And a lot of times, I would say 90% of the time it's budget. But if they say, oh, we liked our connection with them, or they've worked at our venue before and you guys haven't, or they had a great relationship with this certain vendor, then it only just adds to our knowledge of what we can do better. And, sometimes there are certain attributes like friend connections or vendor connections that we can't change. And again, that personality thing is just, if they're going to work with someone because of better personality, like I'm happy for that. Like there's other planners that I know are different personality than us. And so that's great if they choose someone besides Calluna. But if you're not asking those questions, you're not like able to learn and grow from them and move forward.
Yes, I agree. And I need to be better about implementing a survey afterwards. I've done it, but I need to build it into my process. But what really helpful was when I just took them out, like I did this a few times, took my client out to lunch afterwards, like we developed relationships to conversation. So I think too, having both of those where you can have a conversation with some of them and you can dig deeper into like what worked, what didn't, and then also having everybody's feeling. Yeah. Just about at 5 o'clock, didn't even get through all my questions. So much great information. And what I want to tell you guys is that she will be at the Revive and Retreat. And I'm hosting this with Jana Brown, who's an amazing stylist and florist. And we've got a whole team of have so much incredible knowledge to share. I think that we can learn right now, but can learn even more in person when you can make the connection, when you can really build a relationship. And there's times for Q&A, there's times for eating lunch together, eating dinner together. Also have 3 really beautiful design editorials, one of which will be published in Rocky Mountain Bride magazine and printing the attendees as well for that print feature. So I would love you guys check out the website, learn more about Revive. It's at lauramurrayphotography.com/revive. I'm going to put that into the chat box right now so that you guys can check out. If you have any more questions for Heather, I'd love to know what they are. Send Heather or myself an email and just put the subject line as webinar question, and then we can address them maybe on stories, or we can definitely address them in person at Revive. So much, Heather. I know you have a day of meetings today, so it just means so much to me that you took the time to join us on the webinar and answer all these questions that vendors are dying to know. How can we book more, the best that we possibly can? So thank you so much I
And
appreciate
thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm so excited to be a part of Revive this August, and loved, chatting with you today. And again, like Laura said, if anybody has any questions for me, DM me, email me. I'm kind of an open book, so would love to help. But thanks, Laura, for having me.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.